Today, you and I are about to dive into the fascinating world of chatbots. And fundamentally, they're completely changing the way that we interact with all of our digital products. So we're going to cover a bunch of topics. We're going to start from everything from investigative journalism that was done by the Washington Post looking into the data that a lot of these models are trained on, to the TED 2023 conference where one of the co-founders of OpenAI demoed a brand new plugin. So let's start poking and prodding at all these chatbots to see what they reveal. But before we dive into the data and the capabilities, have you ever wondered how some of these things are trained? In particular, have you ever heard the term red teaming? Well, you know what's wild? There's this guy named Andrew White, and he actually got ChatGPT to design a dangerous chemical for him. Yeah. So, to stop that from happening again, OpenAI brought together a bunch of people who are prompt engineers. Together, they're collectively called the Red Team. And it's their job to teach ChatGPT that that's not okay, and that's not how it should behave. So those Red Team members are always poking and prodding. They're always testing ChatGPT to make sure that it doesn't lie, cheat, or help with anything illegal. And so far, I think most people would say that it's worked much better than they expected. Now, hopefully this works well, but there's always a chance that in the future, it can be so smart, it can get around what Red Team's doing. So they'll have to develop AIs that will try to help with that, and it'll be a chicken or egg thing. But there's another way to make sure that these models perform the way we want, and that's by putting good data in the first place. So what's it been fed on? People say the internet, but is that good data, or is that everything? So these big tech companies can sometimes be a little bit like hush-hush about like what data they're actually feeding into the models. But Google has said that they use something called the C4 data set. So the Washington Post actually went through and checked what are the 15 million websites that comprise the C4. And it turns out that most of the websites are either journalism, entertainment, or software development. There's also some like strange ones, like the entire World of Warcraft forums or a website that just sells dumpsters. So business and industrial websites are the biggest category. They make up 16% of the data. News and media sites coming in third, but they found that some of them aren't very trustworthy, which might mean the chatbot's getting some sort of skewed opinions of what the facts are, which might affect its output. They also noticed the dataset is full of text that's based on religion in terms of Western context, with 14 out of the 20 biggest religious concepts being Christian. And guess what? There's a ton of personal blogs in the dataset too, which means that people like you and me are actually influencing the way that artificial intelligence sees the world. So Mark Techpost posted this awesome article that highlighted 8 things you might not know about large language models. So because these things just scale up, did you know that just pouring more money into these systems actually is going to make them work better? We don't even need an innovation. And did you know as the data and the computation expand, we can expect more unpredictable emergent properties to come out of them? Did you know that large language models can actually acquire an outside world representation inside of their model? Did you know that they're basically unexplainable? There's no decision tree or easy way to understand why it came to a conclusion that it did? Did you know it's not limited by human performance even though it was fed on data that was? And that also means that they don't have to reflect the values that were fed into them. And did you know that people who just have 1 or 2 short encounters with it don't usually understand how powerful it is? Now, in past videos, we showed about how asking ChatGPT to self-reflect on itself actually makes it perform better. So I was excited about a recent development at TED 2023 where the co-founder of OpenAI actually presented this new plugin. So Greg Brockman, who's the president, chairman, and co-founder of OpenAI, demoed a new ChatGPT plugin that nobody had ever seen before at the TED conference.
The AI new tool, this one is a browsing tool.
And it's really this kind of meta plugin. It's something that looks at the output of ChatGPT and checks it for mistakes. You could describe it as a tool that helps ChatGPT think about its own thinking.
And it actually writes out its whole chain of thought.
And by doing that, it can break complicated things into smaller goals, or it can fix mistakes that it's making as it gets off track.
And I think that over time, if we get this process right, we will be able to solve impossible problems.
So now imagine if somebody came up with a way that the models like ChatGPT could actually run 1,000 times faster. Well, that might have just been invented, and it's called the hyena hierarchy. So imagine if there was a breakthrough that could be applied to large language models like ChatGPT that could make their memory 1,000 times better. Well, that might have just been invented, and it's called the hyena hierarchy. So this guy, Michael Poley, brilliant mind from Stanford, he came up with this really innovative way to change the way that transformer models, the T and GPT, remember what you're asking them. He named it after hyenas because they're sort of known for their long-term memory and their long-distance hunting skills. Now, the key change was replacing what's normally called the attention mechanism with something called a convolutional mechanism. Convolution refers to some mathematics that basically filter. And at least at smaller scales, this shift is making the system much faster, use much less resources, and retain memory much better. Early testing is showing models that run with this hyena mechanism are performing about 1,000 times better. And once we do that, it'll be easier to fine-tune them, train them on our specific data so it understands what kind of things we do in our lives. So let's take a second to talk about what fine-tuning really means. So fine-tuned models are becoming more common in business, but what does that actually mean? Now it could mean a bunch of things, but here's the 3 main ways you would fine-tune a model for either your business or your personal life to be more productive. First, a feature-based approach. This is where you tell the model, like, this data is less important than this data, so focus on that. It's not great for huge data sets, but if it's for you, you can use your brain to help it out. Second, there's parameter-efficient fine-tuning techniques. Now this involves shutting down most of the model's digital brain and just letting one part get updated. So I imagine it like listening to a lecture blindfolded so that your auditory system can take the information in better. And then there's reinforcement learning with human feedback. Now with this method, you're the teacher, it's the student. Every time it outputs something, you say, that's good, that's bad, that's good, that's bad, and it hones in on what you want. And this hands-on approach is good if you want it to act like an assistant on your behalf and act a certain way, or a business that wants it to be a representative, stuff like that. And that's exactly what Google has been doing with medical information. So there's this really cool new artificial intelligence from Google Medical Research. It's called the MedPalm 2, and it's going to be a doctor that lives in your pocket. It even scored an 85% on one of the toughest medical exams in existence. Not only that, in places like Kenya and Taiwan, it's already looking at ultrasound images and doing better than doctors. And that's a game changer for something like detecting breast cancer early on. So this model is going to start being updated with information from the Mayo Clinic, which might be the last step that it needs to get to the point where it's better than human doctors. And the fact that it can tell from a photograph if somebody is suffering from tuberculosis means that it already has the capabilities to be downloaded, put on a smartphone, and make a big impact in third world countries. But some new research is actually showing an estimate of what the daily cost is to run ChatGPT, and it's a big one. Now, you might be surprised to hear that one industry insider thinks that it costs $700,000 per day to run ChatGPT. That's the bill that Microsoft is paying to run all of those high-end computers that live in the Azure cloud. And that estimate is just an estimate. Because of the success of GPT-4, actually people don't really know, and some estimate that it might be way higher than that. Especially when you think about it powering the Bing search engine, people pulling tons of data off the API to train new models, and this new plugin ecosystem they're developing. Put it in perspective, Microsoft might be spending more to keep it running than they did to even train it, and that was a huge bill. So the best estimates that we have think that GPT-3 actually took about $4.6 million just in training. But because of that exponential jump to GPT-4 and how much bigger that is, possibly up to 1 trillion parameters, some people think that the bill just for training that system might be close to 8.6 billion with a B. But it's weird because something like Llama can run locally once it's been trained, so like the CEO of OpenAI said, Sam Altman, we might already be past the era of big models. But you know who else has deep pockets that can rival Microsoft? Amazon. So Amazon has finally joined the game. They now have an AWS and Amazon Web Services system for generative AI. I mean, they've been investing in artificial intelligence and machine learning, especially to help with their logistics for 20 years. They were the leader in web services. Everybody uses AWS. So it's about time that we finally got some huge foundational models that can run on their servers. And this new service that they're offering is called Amazon Bedrock. So if you use AWS, start upgrading your services now. And if you use Snapchat, you might have noticed AI just showed up everywhere. Snapchat has now introduced a new artificial intelligence chat buddy called My AI. Similar to ChatGPT, but it's kind of cool because you can customize it, give it a name, a personality, a Bitmoji, and it can join big chat groups so everybody can chat with it like it's a friend. And they say that coming soon, Snapchat Plus users will be able to send a snap photo to it and it can send one back to you. That'll be fun, I guess, as long as you're careful.
What did he say?
And finally, I saved the most nerdy thing that might lose the most people to the very end. Do you want to talk about hyperdimensional computing? I do. The way that we build artificial intelligence systems might get upended by something called hyperdimensional computing. So the magic behind these models is that all the billions of parameters that connect them create what's called a latent space. It's a higher dimensional space, it's totally unintuitive, but just know it's this incredible landscape that lives inside of the mathematics. And if you imagine every word in the English language spread out in this crazy landscape, what ChatGPT is doing is it's calculating where they all are and putting them on the screen for you. But instead of calculating everything individually, hyperdimensional computing is a way to group things that have the same characteristics together, saving you a bunch of time. So my analogy is if you walk around a snowy neighborhood and you see snowmen in different yards, remembering which yards they're in is hyperdimensional computing. And if there's only 7 in your neighborhood, then a list of 7 will do. But a much less efficient way would be to write a list of every single snowflake. From that information, you could still figure out how many snowmen there were, but it would take a ton more work. Hyperdimensional computing is counting the snowmen, not the snowflakes. And what that means for you is that soon artificial intelligence will get much smarter and be much better at answering questions for you.